Hello, everyone. Today, we're very privileged to have with us Masara Kim, who is a courageous journalist from Plateau State in Nigeria. For 15 years, he's been working as a war correspondent and reporting extensively on the attacks on Christians and other marginalized people in his home state and around Nigeria. And we're so happy to have him with us today to explain a little bit more about what's going on in Nigeria, and especially for Christians in Nigeria. So Masara, welcome. Thank you for being with us.
Yeah, thank you, Joel, and it's quite a privilege to meet you, Frank, and the rest of the team, and of course the audience following this interview.
What is the current situation in Plateau State and elsewhere in Nigeria for Christians?
All right, so let me start by saying Christians in the Middle Belt generally, that's Plateau, Benue, Nasarawa, the south of Kaduna, south of Bauchi State, Niger State and Taraba, and of course Kwara and Kogi State are faced with what I would say tripartite terrorism. One, you have semi-nomadic Fulani herdsmen who identify as Muslims, waging what appears to be a religious war on indigenous Christians and taking over their communities. And elsewhere you have still members of the Fulani tribe who also identify as Muslims, acting as bandits, as the Nigerian government calls them, bandit terrorists, attacking communities and kidnapping clergy, clerics as Christian pastors, and of course Christian residents, and in some cases even living communities, imposing their own form of government, on communities. For example, in places like the Chikun and Kagoro Chikun, Kagoro, and all of those. I'm trying to remember the other county now, in the south of Kaduna, of course, Birnin Gwari, where these bandits have taken over communities and of course killed some, and those who, out of fear and of course the inability to defend and escape the attacks, surrender to them. They've imposed their own government on them. They now pay levies to them. They now pay, in fact, they have imposed their own laws. They have their own laws. They have their own levies. They have practically everything that concerns them now governing or ruling the affairs of the people. In some communities, they have not actually taken over, but they have, in a way, intimidated the communities into paying what I think is a survival tax. You pay this tax to them, you pay them levies to keep you alive. If you don't want them to come and attack you, you have to pay some millions of naira to them, so that they don't attack you. But in any case, they do not keep their words. They will promise you that if you pay us 50 million naira or 20 million naira or 100 million naira, we're not going to attack you. But they still attack, they still kidnap, and they still subject these poor rural dwellers to intense hardship. And of course, some of them eventually die of starvation because they can't even access their farms, which is, their main source of livelihood. So you have the Fulani herdsmen, semi-nomadic herdsmen on the one hand, annexing communities, maybe for grazing, but of course, we often see that when they take over communities, they, set up their mosques, and then of course turn the places to their grazing zones, and they turn the places to completely no-go zones for Christians. Then you have the bandits attacking communities, taking over the communities, kidnapping for ransom, and also imposing their own governments in some communities. Then you also have the Ansaru terrorists now on the other hand, also doing their own job, all within the same territory. Then again, you go those things that I just listed are mainly happening within the rural areas. Now you come to the cities, you find a rash of blasphemy murders, blasphemy attacks. Enlightened people, professors, traveled Muslim clerics calling on their members to attack anyone who supposedly blasphemes against Prophet Muhammad. And the concept of blasphemy is not well defined. So anybody can just look at you who does not like you, can just see you and say, this person has blasphemed against Prophet Muhammad, and 200 people will just gather around and bludgeon you to death, and nobody cares. The government is not going to try them for that. The government is not going to say anything. As a matter of fact, if you happen to survive that attack, you will be arrested and jailed, whether or not those allegations are proven. For instance, in the south of Bauchi State, in a place called the Warji, that's the Warji County, in a town called Katanga, we have a Christian health worker whose case, by the way, comes up tomorrow at the Bauchi State High Court. She simply shared a video of a former Muslim who, after watching the gruesome murder of the Christian student in the state of Sokoto in May, condemned, that practice. And he said if that was what Islam was all about, he was no longer going to practice Islam. He hated Islam because of those practices. And in fact, he isn't a Nigerian, actually. He's a Ghanaian Muslim, a former Ghanaian Muslim. Now, she shared that video in a WhatsApp group that was created for the members of staff where she worked, that it was actually a government agency. And her own Muslim colleagues now picked that report, that video, and shared to their members, their fellow Muslims, and said she had blasphemed against Prophet Muhammad. Within 3 hours, more than 200 youths had gathered in, by her house, ready to kill her and, of course, burn her house. The pastor of that community, named Ishaku Dano, and a few other Christians within the community pleaded with them to allow them to handle the situation, that they were going to produce her, but they should not do anything, violent or burn her house or anything, and they agreed, only to come back, after some 10 minutes, to now start attacking the pastor and any other Christian that they found around. Meanwhile, right from her workplace, before they could even mobilize to her house, the DSS had picked her up from her office and locked her up. So when this mob came to attack her, of course, they didn't find her there. The DSS had taken her. They, attacked the local Christians instead, and they burned a number of houses, and also attacked the local church, an evangelical church, what's it called now? Ekwa, Evangelical Church Winning All. That's the full meaning of Ekwa there. Now, this woman has been on detention. She has been jailed, actually, not just on police detention or anything. She has been put in prison since that time, I think 20th of May. To this time, she has not been released. There have been several attempts to get her out on bail, which is even what is permitted by Nigerian laws. But the Bauchi State government, which is led by a Muslim lawyer, would not even agree to that. They are charging her for blasphemy, which is not part of Nigerian laws. Apparently, that is a Sharia law provision. But then again, they are still holding her for that. And if she doesn't get respite, if she doesn't get help as fast as possible, she could be sentenced to death, because that is what the law says. Unless it turns out like the case of, I think, Sharif in Kano, whose death sentence was upturned, by the Court of Appeal. But that is the situation. So you have the terrorism, which is happening in the rural areas, which I call the tripartite terrorism. And then you also have, the persecution, the apparent persecution, and what apparently seems to be an ending in the cities.
Yeah, thank you very much, Masara. Can you explain some of the political background of this? What is the history of Nigeria that got us to this point where people are being thrown in jail and attacked by mobs for accusations of blasphemy against certain religious figures?
Of course, right from pre-independence, I mean, since before Nigeria earned her independence, the goal of the Islamic community in Nigeria has been to impose or to set up a caliphate. You could see that from first of all, the opposition of the then Northern People's Party, which was predominantly a Northern Muslim party, political party before independence, to oppose independence, the independence of Nigeria. They vehemently opposed the independence because they were in power. They had power, in their control. The Sultan, that is the traditional leader of the Muslim community in Nigeria, combines political powers, religious powers, and also, of course, cultural or traditional power. So he has some sort of authority over, the general affairs of the country. And of course, I wouldn't know why it was designed that way, but then I think it worked perfectly well at that time, maybe for those who hoped to have the control, the obedience, or the loyalty of Nigeria, to go for the northern elites, to put them in key positions to help them to convince the rest of Nigeria, because apparently in the South, places like the Southeast, there was a form of democracy going on. So if it was actually to happen, if they were to come through the Southeast, it was going to be opposed, because you will have to consult, many families and many, villages to be able to take a decision that, affects the country. But then, of course, it wasn't going to work that way. And so the northern elites, the North, which operated some form of autocracy, provided the best framework, to actualize some of those goals. Maybe they didn't see, the broader implication, the implication in the long run, and that's actually what is haunting us now.
Thank you, Masara, for taking us through this rich history that is a very painful record of what Nigeria has become, and reminding me of what happened to my Igbo people, because I'm Igbo, for full disclosure. Right now in the Middle Belt, from Benue through Jos Plateau to other adjoining states, the bandits have been raining the highways. And the Nigerian government arrested one of the negotiators, who is fortunately a Muslim. And they are now interrogating him. And Gumi, who has been one of the negotiators, was recorded, is in the media as saying that it's persecution against him. What is the relationship between these leading Muslim figures and these bandits? What is happening there? Our viewers would like to know, why are the bandits making tons of money off innocent Nigerians, and the state governments in the Middle Belt and in the north of Nigeria seem powerless to do anything against them? Because this is a form of persecution of Christians as well, and innocent Nigerians going forward.
Right. So talking about the negotiator, the bandit negotiator who has been arrested, I think he was an ally or an aide to Sheikh Gumi. I really wouldn't know why they're taking him, but I think, in my opinion, it's just a smoke screen, because Sheikh Gumi himself has been advocating since 2020. He has been advocating for amnesty for bandits, despite all their atrocities. They've been kidnapping whole communities, entire schools have been kidnapped, entire churches, entire congregations have been kidnapped by these people. They have wiped out entire districts. A district in Nigeria could have as many as 100, communities. They have wiped them out and taken over most of them. You go to Sokoto, in the Birnin, Sabon Birni County, for instance. You have the bandits setting up their own communities. They no longer live in the bushes anymore. They now live in communities. The only towns that you would find that are fairly safe are the seats, the power seats, the headquarters of these local governments, for instance. And then you go to Niger State, you have more than 500 communities taken over by these same bandits. You go to Kaduna, you have, at the last check, 148 communities taken over, just in the south alone. In the north, where they seem to be raging a new form of jihad, particularly in the Christian minority communities, they have also taken a number of communities in the Birningwari, Birningwari, and the Zaria, and then there is this other local government that was attacked some 5 months ago. I can't remember exactly the name, but it's also borders Birningwari. Then you come to Plateau, you have more than 100 communities. Benue, you have another hundreds of communities. I think about 80 or about between 80 and 100. I can't get the figures correctly because I'm speaking offhand. Then you go to the southeast, which was hitherto not touched. It was hitherto seemingly inaccessible by these bandits, now completely infiltrated and somehow taken over in some places, from the coming of Buhari, President Muhammadu Buhari, to power. I'll explain that. Maybe Franklin will know the place called the Isuochi Triangle. Isuochi Triangle. I think the Isuochi Triangle is where all the 9 states of the southeast meets. It borders all it's actually a forest, a large forest area that borders all the states of the southeast. That forest has been taken over and turned to a no-go zone for Christians in the southeast. All the attacks that have been carried out have been staged from that forest. From our investigations, all the kidnappings have been staged from that forest. In fact, all the hostages that we have interviewed and those that have also been interviewed by other media have been taken to that forest. The primate of the Methodist Church
Anglican Church,
was taken
Methodist
to that,
Church.
Yes, he was taken to that forest. From the borders, because it borders all the states. You have sometimes they carry out attacks or kidnappings in Enugu, and then move into the forest. Sometimes they do it in Abia and move in, but it keeps happening, and no one seems to be doing anything about it. And this is because we have a president that is sympathetic to the bandits, particularly their cause, which appears clearly to be a jihad, a religious jihad. We have had reports where they kidnap, let's say, travelers, and then isolate the Christians. They isolate, they ask, them to identify themselves, by their religions, and then they take the Muslims, the Christians to custody, and then release the Muslims. If you look at the releases so far, those that have been released from the train attack,
Abuja,
Kaduna train attack, the hostages that have been released so far are predominantly Muslim, if not 100% Muslims. One of the Christian girls is now being threatened. They have said that they want to marry her. They want to force her into sex slavery, and that is what is happening. You go to all the Christian communities in Kaduna, that is what is happening. They kidnap Christians, take them to the forest, and rape them for as long as they want, and then release them when they like. But you don't see them doing that to the Muslims. As a matter of fact, in June, I think between 25th and between the 5th and the 30th of June, I can't remember the dates exactly. One of the days they entered one community in the Chikun local government, where they kidnapped. I think I shared that report. I sent that report in an article to Nigeria Report.
Yeah,
they kidnapped some
notes below this video.
From 20. Yeah, they kidnapped some 26 residents, I think, and then on their way, to their hideout, while herding them to their hideout, they realized there were 5 Muslim women. They isolated those Muslim women and sent them back and took the Christians, and those Christians stayed there. It was just, I think it was last week or so that they released them. Meanwhile, they were actually threatening that they were going to marry them off if their husbands and other residents did not produce 100 million naira in ransom. And those are the things that keep happening over and over again. And the president and all his cohorts, all his ministers, but the security chiefs who are also predominantly Muslims, seem to be sympathetic. They seem to be happy about, in a way, what is actually going on, because we don't see them taking the action that they would take if such a thing were to happen in a Muslim community. Take for instance, last 2 years when there was a protest in Lagos. The number of soldiers that were sent, the kind of weapons that were sent against unarmed civilians who were predominantly Christians. Now, we expected that the government would deploy the same might to the bandits, but they didn't do it. I have been attacked several times. I've been jailed by the DSS, so I'm not afraid of them. I'm overqualified to die at my age. I think I am no longer afraid, of what happens, because the people that are being killed consistently did not do anything. They didn't say anything to reveal or expose them. But they're still killed. So whether you speak or you don't speak, whether you show your face or you don't show your face, if they want to come for you, they will come for you. And I trust Nigerian government. I trust, the terrorists, to carry out their agenda, unhindered. Because of course the Nigerian security system is not for Christians anyway. Maybe in the future, prayerfully, it would change. But for now, we don't see it, working in our favor. So it's just for us to just live and make sure that history is recorded. When the next generation comes, they should know that somebody did something, and that's why I salute Christian Solidarity International for all that it's doing, to make sure that, these attacks are documented and there's a lot of awareness that is created and support mobilized. And even if it doesn't work, it is in record. It is on record that something is being done and someone is taking the pain.
Well, we couldn't do it without brave Nigerian Christians like you, who are on the front lines and who are always bringing us the news and bringing us the information that we need to help. So thank you very much, Masara. And we're going to continue to campaign for change at the international level for the world to realize the scale of the crisis and even the genocide that's happening in Nigeria right now, and intervene to do something about it. So thanks very much for your time. God bless you. God keep you safe. And we'll talk to you again soon, I'm sure. Okay, we have maybe 20 seconds left, so we can.
Thank you, Masara. That has been great. Thank you, Joel.
Yeah, thanks, Franklin. Have a good trip today.
Thank you. Thank you. I have to run.
I wish we had more time. I wish we had more time. In the future, I believe we'll have the opportunity to X-ray.
There will be, we'll try to have a sequel to this much later.
Yes.
Good.
Bye.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.